I still remember the day I got the call about Grandma's will. It felt unreal. After all these years, a piece of her life was now mine. A small parcel of land she'd held onto like a secret treasure. It wasn't just any land to me. It was where I learned to fish, where we had our family picnics, where I found quiet on the roughest days. Holding the papers in my hand, I could almost smell the grass and hear the creek's steady murmur. I promised myself I'd protect it. When I first arrived, the sight stopped me cold. Machines rumbled where wildflowers used to bloom. Trees lay half-cut, earth churned up like a wound. A crew of workers was busy clearing the area. I walked closer, heart pounding in my chest. "Hey!" I called out to the man overseeing the operation. He glanced at me, sizing me up. "You can't be here," he said, voice clipped. "This land's been authorized for development." Authorized by who? I asked, trying to keep calm. This was my grandmother's property. He smirked, shaking his head. "Not anymore." My throat tightened. "I have the deed. It's in my name. Look, lady, I don't make the rules. You should take it up with the HOA." That was the first time I noticed the signs nailed into the trees: "No trespassing, HOA property." The letters seemed to glare at me like a warning. I stepped back, fists clenched. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was a battle waiting to happen. My mind raced back to my childhood, hours spent chasing butterflies along that creek, Grandma's soft voice telling me stories about our family's roots. This land wasn't just dirt and trees, it was a part of me, of who I am. I needed answers. Who had the right to take this from me? How had this happened without my knowledge? And more importantly, how do I stop it? That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, legal documents spread out like a battlefield map. My hands trembled as I reread the will, the deed, the property tax receipts Grandma had kept meticulously. Nothing indicated a sale, no transfer of ownership. It had to be a mistake. Or worse, a scheme. I felt anger simmering beneath the surface, mixing with a deep ache. This was my family's legacy. And someone was trying to steal it. I dialed the HOA office number I found online, hoping for a reasonable conversation. Margaret answered, her voice cold, clipped. "This property is under community jurisdiction now," she said. "You're not allowed to interfere." "I have legal documents proving ownership," I insisted. "Please explain why your crews are destroying my land." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Community standards must be maintained. Private ownership doesn't exempt you." I wanted to scream. "This isn't right. I will fight this." "Good luck," she said before hanging up. I stared at the phone, heart pounding, determination settling like a stone in my chest. This fight was just beginning, and I wasn't backing down. I headed straight to the HOA office the next morning, heart pounding with a mix of frustration and determination. When the door swung open, Margaret was already there, her posture stiff, arms crossed like she was ready to shut me down before I spoke. "This property belongs to the community now," she said, eyes cold. "You have no say in what happens here." I pulled out my folder. "I have the deed. My grandmother left me this land. Here." I slid the papers across the desk. Margaret glanced at them, then let out a derisive laugh. "These are outdated, probably forged. The HOA has updated records that say otherwise. You're mistaken if you think you own anything." I felt my hands tremble, the weight of her dismissal settling like a stone in my stomach. "I've checked with the county records myself. There's no sale, no transfer. This is my family's land." She leaned back, smirking. "You don't understand how things work here. We have rules to keep the neighborhood orderly. You're just an outsider stirring trouble." The coldness in her voice burned. I was angry, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not leaving until this is resolved. Margaret's lips curled into a smirk. Suit yourself. But you'll find no help here. Feeling deflated but not defeated, I left the office and wandered toward the old neighborhood. That's when I met Mrs. Jenkins. She was tending her garden, a petite woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. I introduced myself and explained my situation. She nodded slowly. Margaret's been running this place like her personal kingdom for years. I've seen her bully families, fine neighbors for nonsense, even threaten to tow cars without cause. My chest tightened. Has no one stopped her? Mrs. Jenkins sighed. A few have tried. Most just give up. But you? You sound like you have fire in you. Don't let her silence you. She pulled out a weathered photo of the neighborhood from decades ago. This land belongs to families who love it. You're not alone in wanting to protect it. Her words lit a spark inside me. For the first time since all this started, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't fighting just for myself anymore, I was part of something bigger. Thank you, I said quietly. I'm going to fight this. Mrs. Jenkins smiled warmly. Good. Because if you don't, who will? As I walked back to my car, I thought about everything ahead. It wasn't just about the land, it was about standing up to someone who thought they were untouchable. I knew the road would be hard, but now I had an ally. And for the first time, I believed I might actually win. The first note showed up stuck to my front door one morning, sharp words scrawled in angry red ink, "Stay out or face the consequences." My heart pounded as I peeled it off, a cold wave of dread washing over me. It wasn't long before the mail started going missing. Bills, letters, anything that could make me feel connected to the outside world. One afternoon, I found long scratches down the side of my car. I ran my fingers along the deep grooves, disbelief turning into a fiery mix of anger and fear. I called the HOA office to complain, only to hear Margaret's voice sneer through the line. "You're lucky we don't fine you for parking violations." Not long after, I got a stack of official-looking letters, fines for unauthorized landscaping, improper signage, even a safety hazard that didn't exist anywhere on my property. I stared at the papers, feeling boxed in by rules that weren't meant for me but wielded like weapons against me. It was clear Margaret wasn't just fighting fair, she was trying to bury me. I knew I needed help. That's when I called Mark, a lawyer a friend recommended. "Listen," he said after hearing my story, "you're going up against people with pockets deep enough to drown you. The HOA president? She's got connections, influence. This is going to be a long fight." I clenched the phone tighter. "I'm ready. I can't just let them take this away." Mark sighed, but there was respect in his voice. "Good. We start by going through every document, every record. If there's a crack, we'll find it." Nights turned into endless sessions with legal papers sprawled across my kitchen table. The property deeds, HOA bylaws, tax records, I read everything, trying to make sense of the maze of language designed to confuse and control. Sometimes, I'd catch myself staring blankly at a paragraph, heart racing, wondering if I was in over my head. But then I'd think of Grandma, her hands weathered but steady, her stories about this land. That fire inside me wouldn't let me give up. One night, I found a clause buried in dense legal jargon that didn't make sense, something about property transfers that hadn't been properly recorded. I jotted it down and sent it to Mark. "Could be something," he texted back. "Keep digging." Even as the harassment escalated, threats, fines, the creeping fear that someone was watching me, I refused to back down. This was my family's legacy. And no amount of intimidation was going to steal it from me. I spent hours at the county records office, my fingers trembling as I sifted through stacks of dusty files and faded documents. That's when I found it, a transfer agreement the HOA insisted gave them authority over my land. But something felt off. I stared at the signatures at the bottom. One was shaky, like a forgery, and the date didn't match the timeline I knew. I pulled out my grandmother's original deed and compared the two side by side. The handwriting was nothing alike. "Mark, look at this," I said during our next meeting. "These signatures, someone forged them." He leaned in, adjusting his glasses. "This is huge. If we prove the transfer is fraudulent, it invalidates their claim entirely." Encouraged, I dug deeper. The land survey maps the HOA presented had conflicting boundaries, plots overlapping, dates that contradicted official records. It was clear someone had tampered with the documents to justify the illegal development. Mark nodded grimly. "We'll file a motion to challenge the HOA's claim based on fraud and falsification. This changes everything." But Margaret didn't back down. A week later, I received a letter threatening to sue me for harassment and disruption of community harmony. The cold, calculated tone of the letter sent a shiver down my spine. I called Mark. "They're trying to intimidate me." He sighed. "That's standard. The more you threaten their control, the harder they fight back. But we're on the right track. Don't let them rattle you." Her threats only fueled my resolve. Every forged signature I uncovered was a nail in her coffin. I began to feel a growing confidence, a sense that the truth was finally breaking through the web of lies. Still, tension hung in the air. I could sense Margaret watching me, waiting for me to slip. But I wasn't about to let her win. I started knocking on my neighbors' doors, feeling a mix of nervousness and resolve with every step. At first, many faces were guarded, eyes darting away, voices low. One elderly man whispered, "We've been too scared to speak up." A mother peeked from behind her curtains, nodding but afraid. Their silence spoke volumes. "I found forged documents," I told them quietly. "Margaret's been lying. She's stealing from us." A few nodded slowly. "She's fined me for a broken fence that wasn't my fault," one woman said. "And my friend got fined for parking her car in her own driveway." The fear was real, but so was the frustration. I could see it flickering in their eyes. Determined, I booked the church hall for a community meeting. When the night came, more people showed up than I expected. Some faces lit up with hope, others still shadowed by fear. "I've felt powerless for years," said Mrs. Thompson, a soft-spoken woman. "But maybe we're stronger together." Stories poured out, unfair fines, threats, even neighbors forced to remove ramps for disabled family members. Margaret's grip wasn't just on the land, it was on the whole community. We sat around folding tables, scribbling on notepads, and slowly drafted a petition demanding an independent audit of the HOA's activities. "This is our chance," I told them. "If we stand together, we can make a difference." Word spread fast. Margaret tried to discredit me, calling me a troublemaker at HOA meetings, whispering to neighbors that I was exaggerating. But every attempt to isolate me backfired. The community rallied. People who once stayed silent began speaking out, sharing their experiences, and signing the petition. One neighbor told me, "You gave us courage." I realized then that this wasn't just about land or legal battles. It was about reclaiming our voices and our dignity. With every signature, every shared story, my hope grew stronger. We weren't alone anymore. And together, we were a force Margaret couldn't ignore. I sat in Mark's office, staring at the files spread across his desk, when he dropped the bombshell. "Margaret's got ties deep into local politics," he said, voice low. "Bribes, favors, she's pulled strings to keep the HOA above scrutiny." My stomach twisted. So even if we have the proof, it might never see the light of day? That's right. Without public pressure, courts might turn a blind eye. She's well-connected and well-funded. I felt a cold knot form in my chest. This was bigger than I thought. The fight wasn't just against a stubborn HOA president, it was against a system rigged to protect her. Margaret's campaign against me stepped up. Neighbors whispered rumors that I was stirring trouble for personal gain. Flyers with my picture and a smear-filled headline appeared on car windshields. One day, my best friend asked cautiously, "Are you sure you want to keep going? It's getting ugly." I swallowed hard. I have to. For Grandma, for the land. But the loneliness was suffocating. I questioned if I could withstand the isolation and doubt creeping into my mind. That night, I found myself flipping through old photo albums, pausing on Grandma's steady smile. I remembered her telling me, "Stand your ground, no matter how tough it gets." Her strength coursed through me like fire. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and told myself, this isn't just my fight anymore. It's for everyone Margaret's tried to silence. I called Mark. We need to get the community involved. We can't do this alone. He agreed. The more eyes on this, the harder it is for them to bury it. The battle ahead was daunting. But with Grandma's spirit guiding me, I wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. I wasn't expecting Mrs. Henderson to come to my door that morning, but there she was, clutching a thick envelope. "I think you need to see these," she said quietly. Inside were original HOA meeting minutes, handwritten records that showed Margaret had pushed through illegal decisions and forged approvals to justify the development on my land. "This is gold," I whispered, heart pounding. "Thank you." At court, I sat at the edge of my seat, clutching the folder. When I handed the minutes to the judge, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Margaret's supporters exchanged uneasy glances, whispering behind their hands. "Objection," one of them tried to shout, but the judge silenced the room with a firm look. "These minutes will be admitted as evidence," the judge declared. I felt a surge of hope and adrenaline. This was the break we'd been waiting for. When the courtroom cleared for a moment, Margaret's eyes locked onto mine. The cold smile I'd seen so many times before vanished. I stood and met her gaze head-on. "Margaret," I said, voice steady but sharp, "you lied. You manipulated records, forged signatures, and destroyed a family's legacy for your own gain. How do you justify that?" Her face twisted with anger, but she said nothing. "I trusted the legal system to protect me," I continued, "but it seems we need to fight harder to hold people like you accountable." The tension in the room was thick. Everyone was waiting to see what she'd say next. She glared, then spat, "You're wasting the court's time." "No," I replied firmly. "This court is finally seeing the truth." The judge called the session back to order, but I felt something change inside me. I wasn't just a plaintiff anymore, I was a force to be reckoned with. The evidence had shifted the tide, and I was ready to take it all the way. I never expected a reporter to show up at my door, but when Jennifer Martinez knocked with a camera crew in tow, I knew this battle was reaching a new level. "We've heard about the fight over your land," Jennifer said, eyes sharp and sincere. "Tell us what's happening." I took a deep breath, the weight of months of struggle pressing on me. "Margaret and the HOA are trying to steal my family's property with forged documents and lies. They've bullied me and this community for years." Jennifer nodded as she filmed, capturing every word. Soon, the story aired on local news channels, flooding social media with outrage. I watched as comments poured in, neighbors, strangers, even local leaders condemning Margaret's actions. Public opinion turned sharply against her and the developers she backed. That weekend, I stood with dozens of neighbors outside the HOA office. We held signs and chanted peacefully, our voices united. "Justice for the land," we called. The energy was electric. People brought food and donations for my legal fund. I met families who shared stories of Margaret's ruthless control and her attempts to silence them. The community was rallying, and it felt like a family. Behind the scenes, whispers started. Former HOA members and employees began stepping forward with damning testimonies. Margaret's facade cracked under the mounting pressure. One neighbor confided, "She's not as untouchable as she thought." I felt hope blooming inside me, a fierce flame after months of darkness. Jennifer stopped me one afternoon. "This story is bigger than we imagined. People want change." I smiled, exhausted but determined. This is only the beginning. For the first time, I believed we could win, not just for my family, but for everyone Margaret had tried to oppress. Together, we were unstoppable. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. "The fraudulent documents presented by the HOA are hereby declared invalid. All unauthorized development on the disputed land must cease immediately." Relief crashed over me like a wave. Months of fighting, sleepless nights, and endless uncertainty had finally led to this moment. I glanced around the room and caught the proud, tearful eyes of neighbors who had stood by me. Margaret sat stiffly, her face pale and tight with anger. I heard murmurs that she'd been removed from the HOA board and faced charges of fraud and harassment. Finally, her reign of intimidation was unraveling. Outside, the community gathered with renewed hope. We organized cleanup days, planting trees and wildflowers where the machines had ravaged. I stood beside Mrs. Jenkins as we dedicated the land as a protected heritage site, honoring my grandmother's legacy and the deep roots our families had planted here. "This land belongs to us all now," Mrs. Jenkins said softly. I nodded, feeling the weight of history and hope mingling in the air. Sitting quietly that evening, I felt a profound sense of justice and healing wash over me. This victory wasn't just mine, it belonged to everyone who had suffered under Margaret's control, everyone who had felt powerless before now. I whispered to myself, "We did it. We protected what matters." Gratitude filled my heart, for the community, for my lawyer Mark, and for the strength I never knew I had. The fight had changed me, but it had also brought us closer. Together, we reclaimed more than land, we reclaimed our dignity and future. And that made every hardship worth it. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the day's noise fades, I sit and let my mind wander through everything that's happened. The fear that gripped me when I first saw the machines tearing through my grandmother's land. The anger that burned when Margaret tried to silence me. And the hope, fragile but fierce, that kept me moving forward. This fight wasn't just about dirt or property lines. It was about protecting a future, my daughter's future. I want her to grow up knowing that standing up for what's right matters, no matter how big the odds seem. I remember telling her one afternoon, "Sometimes people try to take what's yours. But if you hold on to truth and keep fighting, you can protect what matters." That fight taught me something vital: justice isn't given. It's earned through persistence, courage, and a community that stands together. Alone, I might have faltered. But with others beside me, we became unstoppable. The land, once a battleground, is now a symbol of resilience. It holds stories of love, legacy, and strength that will outlast us all. As I look out over the restored creek and the trees we planted, I feel a deep peace. This place, and what it represents, will live on. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No matter how powerful the opposition, standing firm in truth and justice can change everything. And sometimes, that's all we need to start healing the world around us.